Okay, I think I'm going to get started. Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for the behind the scenes of the Leas Lift presentation. My name is Yaz. I am the Community Engagement Manager for the Leas Lift Restoration Project, and I'm joined by our brilliant team. Olu, who is our placement from the University of Kent. We've got Joe Streeter, who is the CEO of the project, and then George Corey, who is our content marketing manager. We are also joined by Zhao from ACME, who is the architect behind the restoration of the Leas Lift, which includes the extension of the lower site as well, and Mark Robinson from Rapid Engineering, who is the engineering specialist leading on the Leas Lift works. Everybody, we're all involved in lots of things across the board. It's a huge restoration project, so yeah, it's a very simplified version of what everybody does. So we have two 30-minute presentations delivered first by Zhao and then moving on to Mark. And then after that, we will move on to a 30-minute Q&A where we'll take questions from the chat. So if you do have questions, please just put them into the chat on the, I think you can access it in the bar along the bottom. And I'll sort of scoop all those up and present them to Mark and Zhao at 5 o'clock. We are filming this session. It's going to be made available with captions for access and also stored in our digital archive. So if you don't want your face to be included in that recording, then please just turn your camera off. Okay, I think we are, oh, and also please just make sure your mics are switched off as well throughout. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to hand over first to Zhao, please.
All right, good afternoon all. Can you all hear me okay? I'm assuming that's a yes.
Yes, we can.
So let's go with that. Just make this full screen. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Good. So this document is a summary presentation to basically run throughout the entire process that has been the road up to date since the first approach through the design process and the challenges and delivering the vision basically for the project and for the site. So I'll quickly run through this. We start with the introduction and the site analysis. Most of you may be familiar, but for context, this is the site that we have along the slope and the Leas, overlooking the coastal park. At large, the site is split in two halves, the lower end and the upper end. They are connected by the existing lift tracks. There are two of those, one at the center and one that was later added to it. I'll explain how we plan to adopt these in the future. And then at the lower end, we have the central core of the lower station. On the right side, we have the existing pumping room that basically moves the lifts up and down. And there is a plan to extend on the opposite end, and then the works to the upper side. So the long story short, in a summary, shows 2,000 square meters overall of the site. The vision and objectives are basically to reinstate what once was the historical lift and to add a cafe next to it, as well as a public promenade. In terms of site, we're looking at the Folkestone seafront here, the master plan, the Leas Lift right next to the coastal park, as I said. It's a project of strategic importance for the city because it's kind of a shortcut to connect the city upper part of town to the coastal area rather than growing through the old quartier, which is the alternative scenario, and then take the pathway along the beach to make it to the coastal park. In terms of the wider context, you may know that there is a plan for a master plan along the beach, of which phase one has already been built, the shoreline next to us. There is also the car parking area to support parking for that same shoreline next to our site. You'll see later how this is of relevance. This is our site in the slope of the Leas. So this is what we have there today in our boundary line. This is what we were given to look at as a first go to the project, which is basically the central core of the lower station, the upper site linked by the train tracks, and then the pump room that basically moves the lifts up and down. The proposed scenario wishes to extend the lower site to a future cafe that is open to public, as well as reinstating all the works and machinery on the lower site, and then improve at large the accessibility to both ends of the tracks of one side and the other. I'll jump into further detail later. The site itself in the location, again, most of you may know, but for context, these are some shots of the existing lower site overlooking the coastal park next to it, which is quite a beautiful promenade for the ones who don't know. I recommend. We also have the access from the old quartier along the beach from the harbor end into the Leas, which on a sunny day is quite pleasant. And then the Leas upstairs overlooking the ocean. Through these shots, you can have an idea. So looking at the site, there is a lot that is concealed from the public eye that is of relevance to this project. The old machinery, the pumping system, the tanks that are part of this process. I'll ask for my colleague Mark after my presentation to jump into further detail on these. From an architectural perspective, the first challenge on the lower station was to deal with the extension to the future cafe. As I previously explained, we're looking at a slope, quite steep slope, and this would mean digging into that slope to make room for the future space, which is one of the biggest constraints, the big topography that we're dealing with. So it's basically jumping from this. Some quick sections. I thought I had an elevation here, but I'll show you later. So the main core, left and right, what was the status of the Leas lift while not in operation for all these years. The interiors, a glimpse of the interiors and the pump room that I mentioned before. So the plan is to be as historically accurate as we can and reinstate this back to life. Improving circulation and accessibility. As you can see, there are some challenges of steps and ramps and convoluted corridors all over the place. And then maximize and celebrate key views of the project to what would have been the key visual angles that the Victorians would have used as guidelines, design guidelines for this. On the upper side, there is a lot of improvement to be done on accessibility, as I mentioned. This includes sloped access to one end and platform lifts to the other. As it stands today, it's also, these rooms are in fairly good shape, to be honest. So there will be minor works to be done to those. And the plan is to kind of reinstate the way of functioning of this as it once was. So these rooms would be for the guided operators to maneuver and operate the lifts up and down, which will be reinstated. And then the pump rooms underneath and the heavy machinery underneath below ground, non-accessible to public, which will be part of that process as well. So some key sections to get into that back of house area. And reinstate the works on the railings and posts and lamps that are so typical of the time. So real quickly, historically, we're looking at the key moments, if one may call it that, from the 1800s up to now. Speaking of Folkestone as a big harbor front, early 900s. Developing more his seaside approach and becoming kind of a destination for the Kent residents in the summertime. Mid-1900s, re-engaging with the harbour front and bringing goods through the train tracks into the city. in this piece of brutalist architecture that unfortunately no longer exists. And then in the early 2000s, the fair that some of you may recall along the beach. And so the plan is basically to reinstate this connection that the residents once have very heavily with the beachfront into today's scenario. So looking at the site, we've looked at historically found there would have been a bathing establishment in the area, which may have justified why the lift was to begin with. So to attract people from the upper side down the cliff into the bathing area. Unfortunately, there are no records of the building anymore, but the Leas lift is there as a test of time, basically, and what would have been the shortcut connection that I mentioned before. Some historical shots of the original design, the strong axis and sense of symmetry that we are trying to reinstate back, the later development of the pump room next door and the second track. Some historical shots of this in operation from the tracks and from the upper side. This is just a kind of a side note to show that the station has undergone over several approaches of color tonalities and finishes a long time. So this is when it took a slight detour from what would have been the Victorian approach, and it took more like of a more direct approach into mimicking the sand of the beach with the yellows and the blue of the ocean and the skies to the walls, and the green of the lift cars to the vegetation. So the original color tones would not have been those, but it's to show that there is a lot of layering and a lot of history in this place. The lift cars themselves, the chassis and their design changed over time. So these would have been the original ones. There would have been some on the next track, the second one that was an addendum to the first, where the chassis would have been tilted and slightly different. We understand from previous presentations and public consultations that one of them still exists in the region, while the other one was, I think, destroyed over time. The plan is to reinstate these two ones from the main tracks and bring them back to life. In terms of pumping room and machinery, it's a very interesting hydraulic system that pumps water into the upper side, and that water pressure moves the lifts up and down. Again, I'll leave my colleague Mark to explain you into how this all works and how we plan to bring it back into functioning. In terms of design approach, the approach, as I said, was to restore the historical pieces, to make this process financially viable by adding a cafe open to public and attracting the general public not only to visit but also to stay, and to make it fully accessible to all, while taking these spaces as potentially spaces to be rented or made free for events, for all types of purposes. So education or presentations or gatherings of all sorts by the community. So the plan is to look into the original drawings and the original construction that is there today, get rid of these sinuous and convoluted corridors, and make of this what it would have been a big open space on left and right, and then reinstate the mechanical works in the pump room by also growing into the opposite end to a new cafe. So that new cafe, the briefing would have been for an external space, some back of house and prep areas for the cafe to operate, and then a big common open plan area for people to sit, and obviously keeping accessibility at the center of the discussion to make it easy to access to all. So there is also, because of this is of historic significance, it's a grade 2 building, listed building. There is a lot of historical narrative that comes into play in terms of composition. So some key axes need to be respected. There is a hierarchy of spaces. Obviously, the original building needs to stay in the foreground as the composition of the 3 modules takes place. The pump room would have been the second, and the cafe is the third, which is what we're trying to accentuate here. So bringing that program that I mentioned before into the context, what this means is that one would need to recess it to kind of detach it from the main composition element, the historical building. It's kind of a celebration of reinstating the building, and the cafe is kind of a secondary element to just bring into equilibrium this central axis by adding a visual counterpoint to the pump room. So what this means is that we need to dig deeper into the slope, which is again playing into that challenge that we opened up the presentation with. But this also brings an opportunity to detach accessibility via a ramp at the foreground to make it very intuitive to all. In terms of rhythm of the facade and composition, as I said, there is this central axis along the tracks. The Victorians would have played with symmetry with these two volumes. And so in order to reinstate the rhythm of the skyline and the rhythm of volumes in the foreground, the cafe needs to kind of adjust to that, which you'll be seeing in a moment. And it reinstates this sense of counter juxtaposed mass to the pump room that exists there today. So we looked into dozens or maybe close to 100 options throughout this entire process. It was a very extensive process to play with massing, to play with pitched roofs. As naturally as it goes, this evolution tends to rationalize and to play with the rhythm and proportions of the original building. So we're looking at window sizes, eaves, alignments, pitched roofs, shapes and angles that play to the original design. The idea is that they pay tributes to the original design, but obviously it needs to be a contemporary approach, as this is a contemporary intervention. And the view is that one should not kind of overshadow the other, but rather sit in the background more discreetly, let's say. So these shapes were taken up to the end of the design concept stage, and then later they got rationalized into something even a bit simpler, which I'll be showing you later. In the upper side, we played a similar exercise. So we took accessibility as the driving force to compose the public realm around it. So this was an approach of integrated steps with ramps at the center. But again, as the design evolved, the same sense of symmetry needed to somehow be reinstated with the strong axis on the central sheave wheel. So you'll be seeing that the final design slightly differs. So what this tells us is that we started by adding this volume of the new cafe deep into the slope, which opened up the opportunity to look at structural solutions to retain the slope. Originally, we went with a CFA piling structure, which would have been quite robust, but also quite prominent visually, and would potentially overshadow the more discreet and camouflage design that we were playing for the cafe. So we've looked into structural possibilities that detoured from this concrete retaining wall, essentially, into what would become later the soil nailing. I'll show you later. In terms of public consultation, it was a very hands-on process. People were very engaged, asking a lot of questions, very curious about how the whole thing would pan out. We had very successful processes of engagement with the public. The first one started in 2022 with design review panels. We had another one in December 22. We have engagement, history of engagement also with Historic England on pre-apps in Jan 2023. They were very supportive of the scheme and very helpful throughout the process. Obviously, compromises came along as we designed the new extension more in line with what would have been historical accuracy, respecting the guidelines of the historical design. And then another meeting in Jan 2023 with them to review the upper side works, where you can see already there is a sense of symmetry reinstated in line of this axis with the central sheave wheel, so slopes to the left and slopes to the right. There was another one, important one, landmark in March 23, where we started to basically rationalize this volume and play it in a rectangular shape rather than the 3 split volumes that you saw before. This kind of added up to the proportions and setting out of the original building. And in the upper side, there was a need to optimize accessibility from one side, as the ramps to left and right would have taken just way too much space and would be out of our land. So what took shape was a sloped access from the left side, a central staircase into the center of the composition to go straight into the platforms, and then a platform lift into the right to grant still wheelchair access from either end. The idea overall would be that from the leas, you would get this very crisp skyline, horizontal line, uninterrupted, which would have been basically a memoir of the original design. So this is a summary of the design process in a nutshell. So from very loose models to a more concise composition to a more standardized composition in this rectangular shape. And then in the upper side, ramping at the center, ramping left and right, and then sloping on the left and platform lifts on the right, having the sheave wheels always at the center of the composition. In terms of massing, the evolution got severely rationalized, as you can see. So it was much louder at the very beginning, and then it starts to straighten up and it starts to play less of into the foreground and more into the background history to kind of celebrate the central historical building in the foreground. At the rear, a fun fact is that the building would originally have been open at the center, not enclosed. So you would basically get inside the building under this roof, see the lifts in operation, wait for them there with a gated access, fully transparent. So over time, it got the walls that you can find there today. But in this design process, we visited an idea of bringing back that sense of transparency through a glazed curtain wall. But throughout the design process, it just felt like out of place in terms of historical approach. So we've basically revisited the size of the original windows that you have there to enlarge them, to make room for people going up and down the lifts to see the interior of the lower station from the tracks, which is a view you don't often think of. And to enhance that further, to paint this black to call attention for the insides, has two big eyes, if you like. In terms of proposed design, this is the operation that we're looking at. So this is the existing site. This is the head-on, so the extended volume to the left, the extended terrace, and the sloped access, the slope retention at the rear. So we looked into the CFA piling, and then it later got replaced, so apologies, with the soil nailing design. Soil nailing is a much less intrusive approach. It's basically a mesh over the vegetation that in due course, we hope that the vegetation will take over and get it fully camouflaged. So in 10 years' time, if things go as planned, you will even forget it was ever there, and it will just belong. It will just be part of the landscape. And then the public access at the foreground, and the works in the upper side as well, the sloped access that I mentioned before, to reinstate the lift tracks structure so that the lifts can operate, to reinstate a brand new sheave wheel so that this can circulate in a circular motion with a hydraulic system as it once used to basically rehabilitate the tanks below ground and all the machinery, to introduce a platform lift, and to use the second platform for PV panels so they can boost power into the entire project in a more environmental friendly manner. So in terms of sections, the expansion looks like this. As you can see, there is a respect to head heights, to roof heights, and the discrete vegetation at the rear makes it a perfect transition into the vegetation in the slope, the lift tracks, the PV panels, and the pump room. In terms of demolitions, there is a lot to be demolished, only that this is a listed building, so we're not actually talking about so many demolitions as such, but more like carefully removing elements that will later be added into the proposed project. So anything of relevance, such as historical timber railings and such, are carefully retained aside so that they can later be reinstated. Other pieces like this end of the wall will need to be punctured through to make room to internal access to the future cafe. So this is a view of the expansion. Further enhancements have to do with the enlargement of the windows that I mentioned before. So currently today there are two fixed frames, smaller fixed frames overlooking the lift tracks as you get in. The plan is to enlarge those so that the experience is enhanced. This strong visual access would have been the central focus of the Victorians to develop this design. Also, by doing so, we include a balustrade in glass to enhance the sense of transparency as you get in, so you can basically see the timber dado panels that will be reinstated as well. Some simple shots, some visuals of what's to become of the space. So as you get in, you make your way into the left or the right, the two exhibition rooms. You can see the larger fixed frames looking the tracks. You can see the access on the side with the reinstated timber balustrades that are there today, the reinstated dado panels all the way across, the original Victorian tonalities, the historical chandeliers, everything stays. In terms of overlooking the pump room would have had added later additional steps from the inside. This is an historical inaccuracy, so those are to be removed. And we privilege instead a fixed frame glazing panel to allow the general public to see the pumps in operation from the exhibition space, again, to celebrate that piece of history. This is the opening to the future cafe, so it means puncturing a hole into the wall where the cafe would have been in operation recently. So that is now all been disassembled. The opening into the future cafe makes this space permeable, allowing you to just not only grab a tea or a cupcake, but also to circulate internally into what's to become the future exhibition space of the lower station. So this is an overview of that space and what's the sense of scale and the sense of materiality from the exhibition area into the cafe. Another piece of work has to do with reinstating historical timber works, so that's to do with windows and doors and frames. The door to the pump room that currently looks like this today would have been a hinged glazed door, timber door with glazed panels. So the plan is to reinstate from historical images and data those same doors and windows, which will be looking like this. And finally, the lift cars themselves. So they were inspected. There is room to basically redo them to the highest standard of safety measures today, but always with a historical accuracy in mind to basically reinstate them as they once was, not only in terms of tonality and materials, but also in terms of shape and size. So all the windows, carcasses of doors, etc., are to be retained as per the original design, only made new. And with accessibility in mind, the historical timber benches are now cut so that a portion of those can be foldable, so that a wheelchair user can get in, rotate, and get out. So allowing additional circulation and accessibility to dominate the strategy for the lift cars, basically. In terms of demolitions on the upper side, they're quite extensive, as you can see from the length of red. This implies a lot of digging, implies a lot of underground works to pump rooms and machinery, and this is to make room for improved accessibility. So as you can see, there is sloped access from the left into the Leas, stair access from the far end, promenade in landscaped to basically make the difference in topography and levels from the upper to the lower side and to activate the landscape a bit. Central stairs that are a perfect symmetry along the main axis of composition, which would have been along this sheave wheel, the reinstated operation rooms, the reinstated office room, the second sheave wheel, and the platform lifts from the opposite end to make way into these tracks as well. So the idea is that regardless of where you're coming from, if you're a wheelchair user or access impaired somehow, you're granted access from either track. You don't need to basically wait or queue on the sloped access unless you prefer to. Basically, the option is given to both. A big piece of work on the upper side is also to do not only with the mechanicals that I've mentioned, but also to reinstate the historical railings. So there is a lot of work to basically remove these aside, rehabilitate the ones that can be, and reinstate them as they would have been, with the exception of the central area that now makes room for 2 sets of stairs. So the railings are basically refit with their setting out around those same stairs. The plan is, by the time we're all done and dusted, to look at from the leas into the ocean and have this crisp horizontal line in a very discreet manner to look like almost things were untouched, basically. Looking into zooming in further into the design in the lower station, this is what we're looking as the proposed design. So the pump room at the far end reinstated, a wire mesh to allow the general public to visit, walk in and out safely without harming themselves. A bit of a back of house office area for maintenance. Then into the main area, we have 2 exhibition open spaces. So as you get in, you make your way into either to queue into a lift or to after-hours sessions of all sorts and types. And then at the far west end, what we have is ramped access or stair access into the lift cafe straight into the main door, or with the added terrace into the side. The roof plan looks roughly like this, so reinstating the pitched roofs of the original building and making good to broken tiles and cleaning them up. And then the 3 pitched roofs into the cafe extension that play to the rhythm of the original pitched roofs next door. Zooming in further into the cafe, this is what we're looking at. So sloped access, stairs from either end, a small external area, a big open plan with seating tables, a big open plan kitchen for prep area, back of house, plant room, and wheelchair accessible toilets to all. And then the soil nailing at the rear, as you can see. The roof plan looks like that. So a flat roof on top, the 3 pitched roofs at the foreground. The tiles and materiality have been carefully selected to blend in well with the original building. And then a bit of landscape to make up for the transition in levels to blend in well with the topography around it. In terms of elevations, you can see that the design is curated to align perfectly with the eaves of the historical building to play into the composition, as well as the window heights and proportions, the heights and proportions and angles of the pitched roofs as well. This is all to basically celebrate the historical composition of the original design. This is a rough section through one of those chimneys, just to give you a sense of scale. So you can see a person's height versus the height of the future cafe chimney, as well as the height of the slope at the rear and how it imposes upon the public eye. In the upper side, this is all you won't be able to see as a general public, as the machinery concealed below ground. So these at the rear are the existing historical tanks, water tanks, reservoirs. This is the sheave wheel that in a clockwise motion keeps the lifts moving up and down. The second sheave wheel, which is now decommissioned and will be kept in the area for historical purposes, basically to tell a bit of the history of the place. But the entire second track is now making room to PV panels that I've mentioned to you before to power up the entire operation. And above ground, as I said, accessibility improvements at large to the left and to the right, and then direct access at the sides and at the front from the far end. The main sheave wheel will be a new cast iron wheel to be installed into sites. The historical one will be moving into one of the region's universities, I believe, for engineering aficionados to study it. The second one is too far gone and eroded, so it will be kept in the area for historical representation of what would have been the second sheave wheel next to the main one. In terms of general visuals, this is an overlook of the whole process by the time it's done. So the main composition of the central volume, the pump room next to it, the cafe at the far end, and then the lifts in operation and the PV panels next door. A view at the front, so you can see the sense of composition between left and right, creating a sense of equilibrium into this central model, and the axis of composition on the lift tracks through the main entrance. A view of the lift tracks down, which is a view that one will be able to experience while taking the lift, and a bird's eye view to the upper works to show the improvements in accessibility, and a curtain wall of glazing to cover the main sheave wheels so you can see it in operation from a close range. A summary of internal shots, just to give you a sense of feel of the space. So the big exhibition rooms, one and the other, the opening to the cafe area, and then a view into the cafe space. So all the tonalities, the warm tones of timber and the reds play to the Victorian materiality tones, which are very earthy. This is a sense of the timber added by the glue lamp structure, which will be essentially an engineered timber structure to hold the chimneys in place. One of the key factors to develop the design had to do with the carbon footprint of the entire process. So we're very conscious about the choice of materials that are more eco-friendly, and we approached those whenever we could. So this is a sense of the height of these chimneys looking up when you are into the cafe area. So the carbon footprint approach was materialized not only in the timber structure, but also in the soft landscape, as well as in key materials that I'll be able to summarize in a moment. So that has to do with the roofing pack tiles, which are traditional tiles from the Kent region. They are quite typical and are a very close match to what you would be able to find into the roof tiling of the original building. The tonalities of warm wine red would have been an accurate depiction of the RAL colors and the reds found in the Victorian building. But obviously, being a brand new extension, it complies with the most up-to-date thermal and acoustic performance requirements. So this means double glazed windows. It means safety measures like metal railings. It means the soil nailing at the rear to retain the soil, and also the pigmented concrete to all the public areas to again play to this earthy tones and kind of mimic the sandy beach tones that you can find close by. So as a matrix, these are done in this and split in this fashion. So you can see the pack tiles that take basically most of the composition in the pitched roofs and front facades. You can see the pigmented concrete on the hardwood scaped areas to create benches, ramps, and steps. You can see at the rear of the composition the soil nailing and the metal railings at the foreground. Now, these railings are kept in marine grade stainless steel, the highest grade of marine quality, because we're very close by the sea, and obviously corrosion is a key factor to play into this and the life of the building. So the highest standards need to take place here. And this is, I think, where we park it. So I would now ask my colleague Mark to basically continue from where I've left it, so we can jump into the engineering parts of the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Let me try and share. Hopefully that's appeared for everyone. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the works to the actual lift itself and what's been done to bring it back into operation. So as you may be aware, that the lift closed in 2017. as it didn't have a secondary braking system installed on the main sheave wheel, which means that if there was a lapse of judgment from the driver, an overspeed, the cars could have been out of control. So that's why the lift had to close in the first place. In terms of how the lift works, the two carriages are both connected to each other, and they're connected with two cables. Each cable is suitable to take the full weight of the carriages and passengers. So you've got a safety factor of 5:1 on each of the cables, and then two cables. Each carriage has a self-weight of approximately 10 tons when fully loaded, and how the carriages are both balanced the same weight. Once water is used at the top to fill the top car, that makes it heavier than the bottom car and takes that down. The water is then emptied out at the bottom into the tanks, and those processes repeated. So in terms of when the lift is in operation, if there's a lot of people at the top of the lift, there may be little to no water needed to take them down because of the weight of that carriage. Whereas if all the people are at the bottom in the lower car, a lot of water will be needed to balance it out. So each operation is different in terms of how much water is used to move the cars. And then the water goes into the bottom tank and is pumped back up to the top and reused again. So it's a very sustainable way of operating. Upon the main sheave wheel, there is a band brake, which is a steel ring with a series of timber blocks that are made from cherry. They operate from the main wheel to go on and off, and that's what controls the speed of the lift. So that is not going to change in its future operation. It's just going to be supplemented with the control systems and secondary braking. So as I sort of touched upon, if the cable's snapped, and that's very unlikely that they would, there's a special spring-loaded braking system under the cars, and it's formed of a series of cams and springs. So what would happen with a cable snapping? The springs kick in, the cams close up, and they close upon a central oak braking timber that runs the full distance of the tracks, and that would bring a fully loaded car to a stop very quickly. So this is a view of the site from probably about a month or so ago. And in this view, you can see the bottom station. This is the main track and the top station up here. And this is 3 of the tanks. Hopefully you can see the cursor on my mouse. 3 of the tanks that have been exposed. There's a 4th tank here and a 5th large tank up here. So, and then you've got 2 buffer tanks here. And the lower tanks are down here under the road area. So this is the pump room. As the water enters from the bottom tanks, it's pumped up. There's pipes under here that go into this buffer tank, and then it goes into these 5 tanks, or it did, and then comes back out through a chute here that's controlled in the wheelhouse. And then when the car hits the bottom, there is a series of hoppers that take the water back into this tank. So as part of the works, because we're not using the second lift, we're just sorting out 3 of the tanks because we don't need all of the capacity. This is a view of the tracks as they were before. So timber sleepers, this is the central braking timber, the oak timber that the cams clamp onto, and the 2 cables that go right round the sheave wheel and back to the car. This is part of the old braking system to bring the brakes on, but it's been altered as part of the refurbishment. So initially, we did a series of investigations. This is the sheave wheel, and this is the band brake around it. The initial investigation suggested some problems with the old sheave wheel in terms of cracking and defects. So the decision was taken to remove it. So that was removed in December 22, which was a feat of engineering in itself. The wheel was taken for full testing, which revealed a series of problems and cracks within the wheel. And this was important because as part of the reopening, the secondary braking system needed to be applied to the wheel, which the wheel was deemed not capable of taking the extra forces from that braking system. What you can see here is the band brake and part of the equipment that operates the band brake. And you can just see the timber blocks behind that rub on the actual main wheel. So yeah, so testing revealed cracks in the spokes and the outer ring, significant pitting and corrosion in all the parts, quite a poor quality of the original material from its age. There was a lot of slag within it. And as we said, the design checks revealed it could not be adequately used for the secondary braking system. So a new wheel was designed. These are some of the images from the finite element analysis that was done. And this is based on the full loads of the cars and with the 2 new hydraulic brakes added. And what's been checked is just one of the brakes is capable of stopping the whole lift in case of failure of one. So safety is the key component in this redesign. So this is a picture of the new sheave wheel outer ring that was cast as a single piece. And this is the inner parts that was then welded together. So you can see there, and it's fully tested with 100% NDT to make sure there's no defects. Then it goes into machining to be finished off. So then as the project moved on, earlier this year in February, the carriages were removed. So we've got the, sorry, got the wrong way here. The lower bogies that are all steel with a water tank in here that takes the water, and then the upper carriages that are all from timber. So the existing bogies have been stripped down. Every single nut and bolt's been out to check what's going on. Here are the wheels before they were tested. So a series of pitting and corrosion, cracked in the welds of key components. So, and this is a new component that's been made to replace an existing one. So this has gone back to check every last part of the structure. The top carriages have been stripped down and the timber is in a very bad condition. As you can see here, this is one of the corner posts that you could put your finger straight through, and the base. So it's decided that new carriages need to be made, which will have the same visual appearance, albeit with a steel reinforced frame and timber cladding. So they're a bit more robust for the future. Here's a picture of the new windows, which have been made out of hardwood. So these go in Iroko, which is more suited to the environment, so it lasts longer. So then I'm back on site. The issues with the tracks, all the sleepers had corroded. As you can see here, you could put a screwdriver straight through most of the sleepers. So they're all fully rotten. Which brings us on to the issue of how to actually do the job safely, because obviously it couldn't be done as the Victorians did, just clambering around. So a specialist gantry was designed, which this is it, that was lifted on. It had 3 working levels, a series of runway beams, and special winches to pull it up and down the cliff to allow the workers to go up and redo the tracks and lift sections of 9-meter track up and down the cliff safely. Without such a gantry, the road would have had to be closed for the last sort of 3 months, and it would have been quite a disruption to everyone. This is a close-up of the gantry, which the team doing the job decided to name Gwyneth. Not really sure why, but so the gantry is in operation for the last sort of 3 months, and now on site the work on the tracks are just about being completed. So you can see some progress on the tracks. This is some of the sleepers and timbers that came out, so well past their sell-by date. And here you've got the new sleepers that are going back in. So these are out of a timber called a Pepe, which is a hardwood that's for marine environments, and the oak central braking rail going back in. And here's the picture of the team working from the platform recently, and a central staircase has been put in for future access and maintenance. So a close-up of the new installation. So in terms of the water tanks, further investigation was done before we started the main works, and there was a number of leaks and cracks in the tanks from previous repairs had failed. So a lot of options were considered for repair or replacement. So the chosen option was to go with a tank within a tank. So the existing tanks remain for historic reasons, and new tanks are sat within them, so that we've got some reliability. So this is a picture of one part of a new tank that's going in out of galvanized steel. So 2 of these joined together, and so there's 6 of these in total. So some of the works to be undertaken include the new sheave wheel that's currently under manufacture, which includes the new secondary braking system, a new control system for safety backup. So if any doors are opened, any overspeeds are detected, any issues are detected, the safety backup system kicks in and stops the lift until anything can be put right. But the actual operation of the lift will be the same as it always was. We've got new tracks, sleepers and braking timbers, along with a new central staircase. New tanks inside the existing tanks at the top of the lift. There's repairs going on to the tanks at the bottom of the lift. New pumps and pipe work are being installed to recirculate the water between the top and the bottom tanks. So new, more efficient pumps are being put in behind the existing pumps that will operate 90% of the time. However, the existing pumps have been retained, serviced, and will be reused for demonstrations. We've got new top carriages, repairs to the wheels and the bottom bogies. So it's quite an extensive refurbishment of the actual lift itself. So that sort of brings me to conclusion on the actual lift works, and I'll pass on to Yaz for any questions.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Zhao. That was, can you hear me? Can you hear me all right? Hold on. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can.
Yeah,
Yes, we
okay,
can.
good. All right. Thank you very much, guys. It always amazes me. You know, I've seen the presentation a couple of times, and it's just incredible to see just the level of detail and scrutiny everything goes under. It's really just incredible. So thank you both very much for your very detailed presentations. So we have a few questions. The first question is from Roger Joyce. I think they don't want the responsibility of maintaining the Charlie Chaplin, which is the one of the original carriages, which is being housed up at Peen in Elam Valley Museum. Have we thought of integrating carriage in a fixed position on the second track? I think it might probably best to answer that question, Mark and Zhao. We have looked at that, but we're basically looking at it's very, very large, and we're looking at installing some PVs to the second track, so there isn't going to be any room for it. The second question is from Bob Eden. What will the journey time be from ticket purchase to exit? And at capacity, what would the passenger numbers be? So at capacity, we'll be 14 people per carriage. And then we've also got the wheelchair access as well. So I think that takes up 2 seats. Is that right, Joe? Sorry, I'm just bringing in Joe, the CEO. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's roughly right. So yes, 14, and then the foldable seats enable wheelchair, pushchair access. So obviously you'll have less capacity, but more flexible.
Great, thanks, Joe. And then we have another question from, oh no, sorry, and then the journey time from ticket purchase to exit. I think that sort of depends where you purchase your ticket. Joe, maybe that's a sort of a question for you as well.
Yeah, so the journey time is when you're actually loaded into the carriage is sort of 45 to 60 seconds, is my understanding. As Yaz says, it was kind of dependent on where you purchase your ticket. The current thinking, and we are just finalising our ticketing plan, the current thinking is that we will have online ticketing mainly. So you won't be sort of potentially, the idea is most people will have bought a ticket online, and you'll join your queue. You just have your ticket checked, and then you'll sort of queue around for the carriage. Obviously, it depends on the time of year, season, or the rest of it. But we're sort of thinking sort of six to sort of 10 minutes maybe from the point at which your ticket's checked to being loaded onto the carriage. But as I say, depends on seasonality.
Thanks, Jo. Another question from Roger. Will the original components be retained on site for curatorial purposes as part of the interpretation? So I think part of the original plan was for us to retain the second sheave wheel. Jo, sorry, I'm gonna put this one back to you again, because that may be changing. Not sure.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. We're trying to retain as much of the heritage and history on site as possible. The second sheave wheel that Yaz refers to, which will not be used on the second track. The original plan was to try and keep it on site where it is and have it on show, like the sheave wheel for the first track will be visible. The idea was to do that for the second one. We have a slight challenge on site, which is a bit of a clash between our accessibility plans and the positioning of that second sheave wheel. So we're exploring options, but whatever happens to it, it will be retained on site in some form or other. And that goes, as I say, for everything. Even with the carriage repairs, any parts of those that can be retained in terms of ironmongery, the same with the doors. We just would like to keep as much on site as possible.
Thanks, Jo. Next question from Ian. At the upper station, there were steps down to the left where there was underground spaces used for Scalextrics racing back in the 60s or 70s. Any plans to reinstate? Love this question. I think these underground spaces might be where the tanks are, and I'm not sure that they are public spaces. Jo, sorry, I'm batting this one to you again.
That's fine. What may be being referred to here is something that we know as the deck chair store. So I believe it was where deck chairs, as the name says, were sort of stored back in the historical times. So it is a space under the Leas, and I've been in the space. When you're standing in there and looking out across the sea, it's a fabulous space. And yes, we did look at the potential to reinstate that space and do something with it. But the decision, and we had some plans and some costs, but we took the decision to focus on just restoring the lift. And also one of our sort of key funders, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, I'm not sure that the deck chair store would have been classified as a heritage project, so it became a little bit complicated. So yeah, we decided not to at that point in time.
Cool. Thank you, Jo. Roger Joyce, as with the Dreamland ride, will the useful bits of old timbers be made into merchandising souvenirs? We are actually working with Mark at the moment to chop up some of the original rails, which will be made available as merchandise, which will look really, really lovely. They're very, very nice to hold in different sizes. You can sort of use them as door stops or paperweights and things like that. Jo, anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, we when the old timbers came off, some of them were made available to be able to pick up, and there are still a stock of old timbers. So yeah, it's something we can look at. But as Yaz says, the sort of focus at the moment is for the rails, because we've seen some examples of those, and they will be really, I think, really great. So yes, we will be merchandising those.
Thank you, Jo. Lots of other merchandise is available on our website. Just a little plug there for our new shop, which is now on our website. Question from Ian. What is the life, I think this one's probably for Mark. What is the life expectancy of the new sleepers and the life expectancy of the new inner water tanks?
So the life expectancy of the new sleepers should be between 25 and 30 years. based on the timber selected for this application. In terms of the water tanks, again, we're looking at 25 to 30 years for the galvanizing, and then at that point they could, or before, they can be recoated. So we'd be comfortable to say they should, as long as they're properly maintained, they should be 40 to 50 years in total.
Lovely, thank you, Mark. Bob Eden, have you been able to use local contractors for the carriage repairs and replacement? Similarly for the new windows and metalworks?
So in terms of local contractors, yes, there is a mixture of local and national contractors working on the project, doing different elements. The carriage repairs, no, that is being done nationally, but a lot of local contractors are involved in other elements on the job. So there's been trying to push to try and involve local companies as much as possible.
And I think a lot of it is such specialist and niche work, with sort of going to the best of the best, that aren't always sort of fully local to Folkestone. But yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Okay, Peter, is it possible to download copies of the PDFs used in the presentation? I think we can make that available, Mark and Zhao.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, we can do that. We can make that available. John Fagg, how will the secondary braking operate? Sorry, how will the second? Sorry, I'm having a total mind melt. Do you want to just?
Do you want me to take on that one?
Yes,
So
please.
the secondary braking system, what that will be is a disc brake that's applied. So there'll be a new disc that's attached to the new sheave wheel, and it will have two hydraulic calipers, a bit like your car disc brakes, but this one, instead of them being on the outside, will be on the inside, and it'll be sort of more like an O shape than a full circle. Each of the hydraulic brakes are set to be always on, and the control system holds them off. So if the control system fails, there's a power cut, anything like that, they will automatically come on. And each hydraulic brake is specifically designed to take the full worst case operating load of the system. So if one failed, the other one could do the full job.
Thank you, Mark. Got a few questions around fares and pricing levels, season tickets, concessions for local residents. There's a all of these questions are being worked very, very, very hard on behind the scenes to try and make it as accessible for as many people as possible. There will be sort of preferential fare rates for local residents, and we're sort of investigating lots and lots of sort of different ticket options, trying to make it really simple and accessible for everybody. Joe, I don't know, you're obviously the person leading on that, so I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, as Yaz says, we and I know everyone is very keen to know how much it's going to cost, and we will come out publicly with our pricing as soon as we're happy with it. But as Yaz says, we will have a special discounted rate for local residents and people that sign up for a sort of like a love, lift lover scheme, something like that. So yes, we are looking at all the different options at the moment, and we will come when we've got it right. We will launch the tickets and let everyone know how much it will cost. I know everyone's really keen to know, so we're working on it.
Thanks, Joe. I think this next one is probably for you as well, Joe. If the life expectancy, this is from Ian, if the life expectancy of the sleepers is only 25 years, are there financial plans in place for extending this in the longer term? Could we end up going through all this process again in another 30 years or so?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Let's hope not. So no, there's a big sort of management and maintenance plan that's been put together when we first went through the lottery framework for funding and all the rest of it. Part of that and the business plan was to think through all of the sort of maintenance options. So that has all been worked through. We are going through it all again. As we've gone through the project, certain things will have changed. So to give you an example, originally when we started talking about the project, we had a survey of the sleepers done. We looked at replacing just a few of them, but as the project's gone through, it made more sense to replace them all at this point in time, so we don't have to do something like replace them all again in a number of years. So there is an ongoing plan, and hopefully we will not have to take on such a large project in the future. It's really at the core of everything we're planning, is to really be thorough with the project, open it up, and not have to close the site again, as has happened over the years. There's too much effort gone into this project to be in that position.
I think just to add as well that whilst this is a major intervention, there is a long-term plan for maintenance every year of varying degrees over each year, because it's got to be maintained properly so it doesn't become a shock in 25 years or so. So there is a plan there to do all this maintenance as an ongoing part of the works and operation.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much. Okay, next question from Samsung. What steps are being taken to prevent slippage of the embankment, where there will be extra weight with the extension at the top and the cutaway at the bottom for the extension? Secondary, will there be vehicle access to the lower leas? So I think the first part, well, I think probably that whole question might be for Zhao. Maybe a mixture of the two of you.
So Mark can chip in structurally wise. Design wise, there will still be vehicle access to the lower leas. And then in terms of extension, the plan is to keep the original retaining wall in the upper side. So the question, the reply to that question would be no. And then in terms of tolerances between the soil nailing at the rear of the building and the building itself, it's probably best if Mark comments on that one.
Sure. Yeah. So like Zhao says at the top, there's no real extra weight, because there is an existing retaining wall there, and the levels have been actually cut down, not increased. At the bottom, the soil nailing is there to pin the bank back. So that's been installed and it's been warranted by the contractor doing it. And that will be monitored and maintained as necessary to stop any movement going forward.
Thanks, Mark. And then the secondary, will there be vehicle access to the lower leas? I think the lower leas will still have their vehicle access, and that's with sort of only responsible for the Leas Lift site. Is that right, Joe?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So John Fagg, is it possible to make an appointment to visit the site? Yes. Next year, so something that I was going to sort of round up on the end, actually. Next year, we will be hosting some more hard hat tours on site. They are hot tickets, so sign up to our newsletter if you're interested, and you'll sort of be one of the first people to find out about that. We were hoping to do it towards the end of this year, but with access to the site being so limited, we settled on it just not being sort of a fulfilling, as exciting as experience as it really could be if you could really get into the spaces. So yeah, watch this space. They'll be available next year, early next year, sort of hopefully around February time. Will there be an opportunity for locals to volunteer as reenactors? Say the good old ticket collector in uniform. Tourists love it. Yeah, I think that we're hoping to have that as part of the interpretation, where we might have sort of the odd day where we encourage our volunteers to dress up in Victorian dress. We've also been, in the last year, slowly collecting sort of old Victorian costumes to have for visitors to sort of dress up in occasionally as well. So yes, it's all a possibility. I've had to drop out of presentation. Oh yeah, that's fine. No worries. We will have the recording available online for you to have a look at if you've had to drop out. Roger, who will ultimately be responsible for ongoing maintenance? We can't rely on there being a local authority in place. I think Mark probably answered that one in terms of maintenance, daily maintenance. And I think the plan is also to do sort of deeper essential maintenance in January every year. Is that right?
Yeah, there's so in terms of responsibility, it'll be the Folkestone Leas Lift Company's responsibility to maintain the site and everything. So yes, there'll be a variety of daily, weekly, monthly, annual checks, and to follow on from the point Mark said earlier, yes, maintenance, health and safety is key for us. So yeah, ultimately our responsibility, not the local authority.
Thanks, Jo. And Mark, did you want to add anything to that about the maintenance?
No, I think that sort of covers it. I mean, the only things I could sort of add is that there will be a mixture of maintenance from the staff, third-party engineering specialists, and also insurance inspectors as an overview. So it will be fully checked and verified at all stages.
Lovely, thank you. Vivian, thank you very much for your comment. That's very nice. Vivian says, very interesting. I'm from North Kent, less local, but think this will be an amazing addition for Kent overall. Thank you for this detailed talk. Hope the recording will be on website for others to see. Yes, it will be. So please do click, share, tell your friends. Bob Eden, will there be a pre-proper opening commissioning period when locals can volunteer as user guinea pigs? I don't know how to answer that question, Jo.
Yeah, sorry, it made me laugh. I'm not sure that we'll be wanting locals to volunteer as guinea pigs, but we won't operate the lift until it's been fully tested. So no, we won't have guinea pigs. But yes, we are planning a number of sort of soft launches, and we have had a number of sort of competitions where people have won sort of golden tickets, and we'll be doing some more to encourage golden ticket users. So there will be a period where we're sort of testing perhaps operational perspective, but not guinea pigs per se.
Cool, thanks, Jo. And a question from Ian: is Roger Dehaan underwriting the operation into the future? Is he part of the Leas Lift Company?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Roger Dehaan, he's not part of the Leas Lift Company, but he has, as part of the S106 agreement, we've benefited from his contribution, as well as all the other key funders that we've got. So not underwriting the operation, but has made a significant contribution, just like the National Lottery have, and a number of other funders, all of which you can find on our website.
Thanks, Jo. Bob, just looking for a free ride. Fabulous. We're all looking for a free ride. Yeah. Come and volunteer with us and maybe you'll get a free ride. John, did you say that the lift will be open all year? The lift will be open all year, but I just want to double check this with Jo in terms of the maintenance period in January.
Yes, that is currently the plan. So situationally where we are, we're probably not able to operate the lift all year round, but we do also need to undertake, as you know, we've talked about different types of maintenance. So January seems to be a sensible month to undertake that maintenance, when it could be impacted by weather. But if we don't open that month, we can do the annual maintenance. Yeah, so it'll be open all year round apart from our maintenance periods.
Thanks, Jo. Right, comment from Peter. Very pleased with the presentation. We'll try and get on a hard hat tour next year from Leicester. Fabulous. You're welcome. Come and visit Folkestone. It's a lovely town. Ian, great presentation. FYI, I'm watching and contributing from Northern Cyprus. Gosh,
Fabulous.
still have family locally. Thank you so much for joining us from all over the world. The National Lottery Heritage Fund will be delighted to know that we are broadcasting internationally from Folkestone. John, as a retired insurance engineer, I used to inspect the lift. This has been an interesting presentation. I also play in a brass band, so if you need one for the opening, let me know. We will make a note of that. Thank you, John. And I think we probably have your details from you signing up to this presentation. So thank you very much. Just had a couple of other questions since we've got a few more minutes. Zhao, this one was for you. Considering how many different roof styles you looked at and sort of brainstormed, you said that you were looking at nearly 100 different options. What were the sort of deciding factors and which led you to choose the roofs, the tops, the design that you settled on in the end?
So the process of filtering design optioneering went back to the design process that the Victorians would have taken in terms of proportion of the volumes within the cafe in comparison to the neighboring volumes. The skyline of the pitched roofs and their proportions between voids and tiled roofs, the angles of those same pitched roofs. So all of that had added into a combo that filtered a lot of the auctioneering as non-viable, as out of place, basically. And that transported us into a place where hopefully the cafe extension will feel more integrated into what would have been the original approach to all of this. And hopefully in a few years' time, people will not look at the cafe as an add-on to the building, but as something that was always there to a degree. And that is the intent, to basically treat that as with the respect that it deserves in terms of not only the massing approach, but also the materiality approach and the sense of space, the feel of the space as a natural extension to the original building. Mm. So I'm not sure if that replies to your question, but yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Shao. That's lovely. Mark, this one's for you. How much does the big wheel weigh, the sheave wheel?
So it will be just over 3.5 tons.
And how big is it? How wide is a wheel?
I can't remember the diameter off the top of my head.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot now.
It's probably about 3.5 meters ish. I'll have a look now.
Huge. Thanks, Mark. And then to put you on the spot again, Mark, what are the new sleepers made of? What is the wood?
It's a pepe, which is a native either African or South American hardwood that can be used in saltwater and marine environments. So it's usually used in piers and jetties. And it's also been used recently on the Blackpool Pier replacement of all the timbers there.
Great, definitely for marine environments then. Great, thank you. Roger is asking Joe, can we talk later about remaining fundraising opportunities?
Always happy to talk about fundraising opportunities. So yeah, sure.
And a question from John, is there a public car park near the lower level? I believe there may currently be one, but if there is, will it remain? As far as I'm aware, it's going to remain. Joe, you might have some other knowledge on that?
No, exactly the same. As far as I'm aware, it's staying. I don't think there are plans to get rid of it, not that I'm aware of.
Great. If anyone has any more questions, now is the time to come forward, or we may run out of time. But we've had quite a lot of questions there, so I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we've exhausted them. While I will let you have a little think about any more questions you have, I just want to thank Mark and Zhao very, very much for your time this evening, and all of you for coming and being a part of this presentation. This presentation was made possible by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and all of your support as well. Sometimes just showing up is a fabulous thing, and you've all generously donated as well, so thank you very, very much for that. I've just got a few more questions. That's a very thorough presentation. Oh, thank you very much, Roger. Do we have an opening date? The golden question, Joe.
Yes, it is the golden question. Yeah, I mean, I think we've sort of publicly been saying that we're going to be opening sort of, well, certainly the project was due to complete sort of springtime next year. We're having a bit of a review of the programme and progress. So we'll come back with a revised opening date in the coming weeks to keep everyone up to date.
Thanks, Joe. A question for Mark. Why so much tank capacity, assuming the water is recycled?
So there is quite a lot of capacity. However, the water can be used up quite quickly. So it's a balance between having the pumps running continuously or on and off. So whilst there was a lot more capacity there for the two lifts, we are reducing the capacity, but we're reducing it to a point where we're not having to run the new pumps constantly to keep the lift operational in busy periods. So it's a trade-off between having not enough and having too much. That's why we're only doing 3 out of the 5 tanks.
Thanks, Mark. And then a comment from John. When I was a child, it was a penny each way. Thank you for the most interesting presentation. Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, I'm assuming that's the end of the questions now. So thank you all very much for your questions and for your comments as well. If you want to make any other comments, feedback on this presentation, critical, positive, whatever, please send them our way to the hello@email address, because it really helps us feeding back to our funders. So we have a couple of opportunities coming up. We have a free family-friendly puppet show coming up on the 23rd of November, which is going to be at the Grand Burston Hotel. Do book your tickets. I think we're at about maybe 80% capacity now. So do tell your families. It's sort of young children friendly. We developed it last year, and we're bringing back a slightly Christmassy special for this one time only. So do come along to that. And then we've got our hard hat tours next year. We've got plenty of other things coming up as well. So do keep an eye out on our socials. It's so busy doing lots of outreach. And, you know, George is always doing research and posting really interesting stuff on social media. So thank you all very much. And yeah, when we have our ticketing up and running, do sign up as a member and get your tickets, because all of that is you know, sort of going to be contributing to us becoming operational and hopefully being a very successful lift and staying open for another 140 years. Thank you all very much. I think we'll probably finish there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Yaz. Yeah, thanks to the lift team.